Hey everybody, it's been a while, but I had a lot of life happening and haven't been able to get a video out recently. I have some interesting stuff ready to go with some more on the way, but I wanted to show you some of the light hiking I do around here when I'm not traveling. Sadly, the wind noise means you can't hear the actual conversation on this video, but it does give me something to talk over. So my main topic today is vehicles. My main vehicle for the last 7 years was a 2018 Subaru Outback Limited 3.6R. I have a couple of pictures of it right here. We went to Acadia, Skyline Drive in Virginia, New York City, Williamsburg, and Myrtle Beach in it. All sorts of trips. I actually modified it a bit with aftermarket heavy-duty skid plates for some off-roading and a hidden hitch for light towing. I've driven it out into our field many times, and a few times up into our logging trail in the backwoods, as well as a number of seasonal limited-use highways in New York State. Watching the various YouTube off-roading Subaru videos isn't that far off the mark, really. Sadly, the trip with 5 to Williamsburg started to show the space limitations of the car. We'd used a hitch-mounted basket and a large plastic tub with ratchet straps to get more cargo capacity, but it did look a little redneck. I wanted to keep the car for 10 years or more, but it started to have issues, and I don't know why. I took pretty good care of it. Always did oil changes and got any issues looked at. It developed a bad oil leak, and I got that fixed, which required a gasket between the engine block and oil cooler. After that, it started having a check engine light for a cam phaser position issue, followed by the dealer saying it needed a new transmission, followed by bad misfires, needing new coils and plugs, followed by grinding, likely meaning wheel bearings, and at this point, I traded it in. While I had my car in the shop for the transmission, I was given a loaner 2023 Outback XT for 1.5 months, and I got to see what the more modern Subaru was like. And this image here is pretty representative of the loaner I was given, including being white. Let me show you a stock image of the dash of my 2018 Outback. Notice there's a decent touchscreen, but also simple buttons and dials for temperature, radio, air conditioning, recirculate, seat heaters, fan, and on and on. Now let me show you the same pic of the 2023 and newer. Notice things like recirculate or quick changes of the temperature are gone. Seat heater buttons are gone and are all on the touchscreen. Some of them, like recirculate, require a menu dive. Even the physical buttons for temperature just move it 1 degree at a time, as opposed to a simple dial like in the 2018 that you could just spin to whatever temperature you wanted quickly. What's worse is the driver monitoring system that would blink lights onto the windshield and beep in ever more ways. You'd try and figure out what the changing green, orange, red lights meant and be looking at the dashboard, and then it'd say, "Keep your eyes on the road." I would if you'd stop distracting me. During the loaner time, I took a trip with 2 other people, and we packed that Outback XT. It was clear with our hobbies and luggage that the Outback was just too small. When it was time to look at new cars, I was a bit leery of the Ascent for a couple of reasons: the turbo engine, the CVT, and the new driver monitoring system and touchscreen. What actually sealed the deal against another Subaru was the seats in the Ascent, though. We just found them extremely uncomfortable in like 2 minutes in the showroom. Worse than the 2018 Outback. We also tried out a Toyota Grand Highlander, but I'd lose any of the off-road ability of the Outback, which I wasn't keen to do. It was also a turbo engine, which I'm mostly trying to avoid. Thanks to some family recommendations, we tried out a Honda Pilot Trail Sport at a showroom. It was very comfortable. This model has added ground clearance, it has some skid plates from the factory, and a hitch as well. Off-road tires came with it, and it has a normal 6-cylinder engine. It also has a full-size spare tire, which is kinda unique nowadays, and off-road tuning to the all-wheel drive, which, based on the YouTube testing anyway, seemed very close to the Subaru all-wheel drive system. And this ended up being our next vehicle, the 2025 Honda Pilot Trail Sport. The one that I got ended up being a Honda Pilot, but the Trail Sport edition. And this is, well, what I got. And you might say, okay, why the Trail Sport? Well, a couple of reasons. One, my Outback I had changed to have a hitch, and this comes with a hitch, so I wouldn't have to re-add a hitch. I'd added skid plates for some off-road fun. This comes with a number of skid plates from the factory, and I had switched to some Yokohama off-road tires, and this again comes with some combination on-road, off-road tires, these Continentals. I added on a running board to help people who are short to get into this trail sport, because it's also lifted an inch over the regular Pilot. Again, more ground clearance, making it closer to what the Outback had, although not on par with an Outback Wilderness. And I did add, as you saw up in the front, this kind of pusher bar bumper adjustment, extra bumper protector. And it has some bit of a built-in skid plate to provide protection up front when you're coming up on something. Now, that's all for fun on weekends, but it's also important in my mind for dealing with surprise potholes, just very bad roads that you don't know on a trip. You don't know they're going to be there. And I've found that having these semi-off-road tires have handled sudden impacts better than kind of just your standard road tires. They have better grip in different weather conditions, and if you do go to some of the parks and things, and there's some places where you need to drive to or can drive to that aren't, a parking lot, well, it's useful for that as well. And the extra ground clearance makes it less likely to curb your front air spoiler or any part of your front work on a curb, because you have a little more clearance. Now, the other thing that's big about the Pilot is the size, and it adds a couple things. The primary thing I was looking for was actually these captain's chair seats. So these are a big deal for older people, and I don't mean like 70-year-olds. I mean like 18, 19, 20-year-olds on up. When you're going on a long road trip, these are a lot more comfortable to sit in for hours and hours and hours than the Outback seats were. It's just a better thing. It also has, unlike the Outback, a separate rear climate zone, so that's really nice. You do lose the heated seats in the back, although that's not really a huge problem. It is kind of weird how all the Japanese makers anyway seem to have these really fixed trim levels, and you can't get the off-road variant Trail Sport with heated seats or an upgraded sound system. Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense if you're willing to pay for a package, but they just will not build it. So, yeah, these seats are the biggest benefit, but there's a couple more. As I was saying about it just being large, in the back here, we have additional storage space. But we can also go ahead and flip a third row of seats up if we did just have 5 people and you wanted to have a little more comfort if you're not on a big trip. But when you're on a big trip like I am now, I'm down in Massanutten, just having extra space for your suitcases when 2 people at least have other hobbies that they do in downtime. So again, photography, videography here that I do, that's its own backpack instead of things. And similarly, my sister does crochet, and that's a whole extra bag of stuff. So I think, as I said before, we were getting to the point where we needed to put a basket on the hitch to have enough room in the Outback, and that's not really necessary with the Pilot, but it is still an option because this one comes with the hitch. And then kind of the final thing is some of the driving aspects. So I'm not going to say that I love the way this drives. It's not a sports car. It's not as nimble as even the Outback. But what's important is actually the controls over here. Not so much the driving, but how you can be driving and safely actuate the temperature controls, at least some of the radio controls, and and the like. They still have the physical dials, physical buttons that stay in the same place when you're going to activate them. And their touch screen is kind of smaller, but every part of it works like a screen like you'd expect it to. So that's kind of helpful. And it still does have some physical buttons for going back and going home. So it's just, really kind of easier to interact with. The other part of the driving that I can't really demonstrate well with my big camera is the safety assist things. It doesn't have little lights up here like the newer Outbacks did. So it's not bleeping and blinking at you all the time, which in itself was actually distracting. Yet then the Outback would be saying, you're a distracted driver, pay attention to the road. And it's like, well, you're beeping and you're bonging and you're flashing at me, and I'm trying to figure out what the problem is because I don't see a problem. And now you're yelling at me because I'm trying to figure out what the problem is and I'm not looking at the road. So this is actually a lot easier to focus on the road than the newer Subaru systems. It's not making noise, it's not flashing lights all the time. And really, the only thing that it does do if you're starting to drift out of lane is it kind of shakes the steering wheel. I don't love that, but I'll take that over constantly being distracted by things that the car is doing, theoretically for your safety, that isn't actually making things safer. So that is most of the insides and the rationales behind the Trail Sport. The only other thing was the engine selection. All the other competitors were either a full truck body and a lot more expensive. That might be like a 4Runner or a Sequoia from Toyota, or like the Grand Highlander or the Ascent. They were turbocharged 4-cylinders. This is still a traditional 6-cylinder, and it has a traditional transmission. They are variants of pretty well understood and historically reliable systems, so I'm hoping it'll be good for a lot of highway driving and some off-roading, and will last me a while. I don't know for sure because I haven't personally owned a Honda before, but people I know who do own Hondas, they've had them for 10, 11, 12 years with, basic maintenance, and that's really it. And unfortunately, compared to the Outback, which I probably talked about my issues that I had, that one really kind of failed for me and kind of made me rethink Subarus. But what really killed it was the seats in the Ascent just being completely uncomfortable. These seats are pretty standard, very comfortable. The Ascent, though, right in here had a separate piece just for the driver's seat, and it slid forward and back for no reason, and that was really weird feeling and uncomfortable to sit on. And then the rest of the seat was actually kind of worse than the 2018 Outback seats. Just very uncomfortable for us, and I guess you either like them or you hate them. Some people have told me they really like the Ascent seats, they love the Ascent, and I wanted to, but it kind of everything about it was worse than this Pilot. The only benefit was, yes, you could get a fully loaded Ascent, and the Ascent, all the Subarus kind of have a lot of the off-road package. They don't have the skid plates, but they have the off-road programming, they have the ground clearance, they have the all-wheel drive system that are options on a Pilot. But and you could get all those for cheaper than you could get this Trail Sport with the options that I put on it. Yeah, but if it's super uncomfortable to be in, then it's not something I'm going to want to take on a long road trip, and therefore it's just no reason to buy it. So anyway, that's the new vehicle, and that's kind of my rationale behind it. And I put about 2,300 miles on this. I've done a couple short day trips, one overnight down to see a relative, and now this Massanutten trip with the Outback, with the Outback, and this Massanutten trip with the Pilot. And So far, so good. I don't really have many negatives. A little bit of relearning how a traditional automatic works. But all in all, it's been pretty good. And if you can believe the computer, the gas mileage has not been as bad as threatened. I've been seeing very similar gas mileage as I was getting in my 6-cylinder Outback in a much bigger vehicle, which is pretty nice, assuming you can trust the trip computer in the cars. But for me, it's been like 18 miles per gallon back and forth where I live. That's very hilly, very twisty, windy, and you always get horrible gas mileage there. And on the highway trips, it's been getting close to 23 miles per gallon, which isn't bad. And about, like I said, very similar to the Outback. So maybe it doesn't feel that bad to me, but certainly your mileage could vary. Obviously, on the long road trips, that does make gas more than maybe it would have to be. But I still think it's beating even going like to Florida or halfway across the country and the other way, 3 people's plane tickets. So, yeah. All right. So that's about it for the vehicle change and a quick review of the Pilot. As I mentioned, I recently finished at Massanutten, and the next video will probably be a review of that timeshare. Here's just a little bit more video of the hiking that we do on our off times around where we live, and I look forward to everyone watching the review coming up of Massanutten.